Rock Talk, here with former Representative Emily Sandblade, not of the Women's Defense League, but representing the data that was crunched for this fabulous poll that you're talking about.
Yep. Yes.
And we're gonna go right to Max first here because he made an observation in the break, and we wanted to make sure we got that.
John Arlott Jr. wrote a book. He compiled a comprehensive set of studies on gun control and looked at the crime statistics and looked at what the actual causes of crime were. And, of course, he found that the shall-issue states, which we're trying to become with SB 116, had the lowest violent crime rates. But what he found was the violent crime rates are affected the most, and by far, women were the biggest victims. Women are hurt the most by gun control laws. Women benefit the most because they tend to be smaller and they tend to be victimized a lot more. Women benefit the most if they're allowed to keep and bear arms, and a lot of police chiefs are denying women the right to keep and bear arms. They're refusing to issue permits to women for who knows what reason or reasons.
Okay, so back to the poll.
Actually, our next poll question was relevant to that as well. And we asked people, we noted that concealed carry permits under state law can take up to 14 days to obtain. And we asked if there should be an exception for women who are victims of domestic violence to be able to protect themselves and their children outside their homes while they're waiting for a permit. And 67% of those who we surveyed believe that there should be such an exception in the law. So there is that recognition that in a number of cases, women could benefit from being able to carry a concealed firearm, and it looks like most people believe that this is a pretty common sense type of thing to do. We also asked people what they thought about the situation where, in general, only law-abiding residents are applying for concealed permits. The state police do process some of the permits, and they reported in their testimony on SB 116 that they have very, 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 very few rejections based on criminal record. It's like a few a year. It's so small that it's just it's almost statistically insignificant.
So you have to ask yourself, is that because there are so few criminals trying to get guns, or is it because there are so few criminals who are stupid enough to go put themselves through the system when they've already got a record?
Well, that's our question. Except we phrased it a little bit differently, but that's what we were trying to get people to tell us what they thought. And we asked them if they believe that concealed carry permits are ineffective in preventing criminals from carrying a concealed weapon. And 76% of them believe so. And of that 76%, what we found out when we broke that out, which was kind of stunning, was 72% of Democrats believe that, and 76% of Republicans and 79% of undeclared voters believe that. Mm-hmm. So they really don't see the concealed carry permits as effective in preventing people who shouldn't be carrying anyway and who are prohibited from carrying under federal law. We don't really need a state law to back this up. They believe that we don't need concealed carry permits to prevent, or that they don't work in preventing criminals from carrying concealed firearms. What they do is they work in preventing people who are law-abiding from defending themselves.
That's the only people who would not do it. I mean, if you're not a law-abiding citizen, what do you care?
Right.
Yes.
So if I choose to carry concealed without a permit, I am not a law-abiding citizen by definition, and I don't do that. I would not carry concealed without a permit under the current regime. But by definition, a non-law-abiding citizen doesn't care, and the law-abiding citizen gets caught short.
Yes, exactly. We're the ones who are being disarmed, in other words.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And especially women, because women are considerably less likely to apply for a permit. And they're often in the situation where they really don't even consider the need for a concealed firearm until they're in direct danger from, domestic violence, stalking, and the like. And as a result, they end up in a situation where they put their lives at risk for a number of weeks, even if they do apply for a permit. And there's also an issue where we have heard stories about how women who are involved in domestic violence situations who feel the need to protect themselves and their children are being denied permits and end up having to go through an appeals process, which can take, at least a month or so. to deal with that. So it's a really bad situation as it is right now for women.
Do they have typical grounds when they deny under those circumstances, like you're emotionally distressed, you might be inclined to use it? Go ahead, Max.
In Seabrook, we've had 4 people who I know of, at least 4, who were denied a pistol revolver license by the prior police chief. None of the 4 were crazy. None of the 4 were dangerous. None of them were criminals.
They all passed the federal background check.
Correct.
They all bought a firearm legally.
And 2 or 3 of them were armed service vets. And all 4 of them were individuals who were disliked by the police chief. They'd filed formal complaints. They'd spoken up at deliberative session against measures that he wanted. It was all personal animosity. In all of the cases that I'm aware of throughout the state where police chiefs are denying people a pistol revolver license, it's absolutely personal animosity in every single case. I've never heard of.
If they were trying to get permission for gender reassignment, there would have been a huge uproar.
Of course.
Maybe we should do that at some point.
Okay, so what's next?
Anyway, that's pretty much what we asked. We did ask one final question, which was kind of an interesting question. One of the situations that we've become aware of over time is that most of the money that's financing Moms Demand Action and a number of other anti-firearms groups, and which has been promised to the Democrat Party if they would pass anti-Second Amendment legislation, is from Bloomberg, Michael Bloomberg, and his group. And what we asked people was how they felt about that. We pointed out that most of the money that's financing the effort in New Hampshire to defeat SB 116 comes from contributors who are out of state. And we asked people if they agreed or disagreed that a few wealthy out-of-state people should be able to influence New Hampshire state law. 89% of the people who responded to this question disagreed that this should be able to happen. They're very, very unhappy about the idea that a few out-of-state people can come in and just roll over in-state people and roll over the will of New Hampshire residents.
And the New Hampshire Constitution.
And the New Hampshire Constitution as well. You're absolutely right on that one. And we did a breakout of the people who actually thought that was okay, and we came up with 15% of the Democrats thought it was okay, so that means 85% did not. 8% of Republicans, and I'm wondering who they are, and 11% of the undeclareds. And that was a pretty enlightening question because there seems to be a lot of resentment about big money coming in and just trying to rule what happens here.
Well, it's been a political narrative forever, really. I mean, at least for the last 10 years in New Hampshire, the Democrats certainly bring it up a lot, and we bring it up a lot because they do. So, it's an important question. I think people aren't aware of just how much outside money comes into the state. It's a small state, so that's going to happen. But when you have an issue like this, the people's elected legislature has spoken. They've made it clear that their constituents want this to pass, but yet the bulk of the resistance and the Democrat governor, who is probably going to veto it, are influenced by massive amounts of money coming from outside of the state of New Hampshire.
Well, that's a pretty interesting thing because even PPP is a Beltway-type organization that was started by Democrats who wanted to have a polling capability. And so when you look at the bias, of each group that does polling, you have to accommodate the fact that they're going to look, that they're going to work with their bias. And I think that my bias is fairly obvious, and there's no question that we want to explore in depth what people think. And we don't have a problem with giving them the context that the concealed carry law works, in which it works. And so to pretend that PPP is not biased is not really a valid assumption.
Oh, it definitely is. Definitely
Yeah,
is.
there's no question about that. It was very clear from the rest of the questions that it was a Democrat polling organization. And if the governor wants to use the results of that poll to support her desire to veto, then she would have to totally ignore what we found. And I think that needs to be pointed out.
And I'm sure she'll try to ignore that. But, I mean, it's well known that public policy polling is a Democrat-based organization, so much so that when they find good results for a Republican candidate, it's considered to be an exceptional verification or validation of that candidate.
All right, we have 2 minutes. I want to hear about the dogs.
The dogs?
Real quick. Dogs, barking dogs, crime. Didn't you?
Oh, the barking dogs. I did a study a number of years ago for a neighborhood group that had about 400 homes, and they were having a tremendous rash of break-ins. I mean, it was just epidemic. And one of the things that I tried to do was I tried to figure out what factors for this group. I tried to figure out what factors would keep your home off the list of homes that were going to show up in the police reports. And one of the things that I found out was the biggest single factor, and it was almost universal, the biggest single factor that kept your home from being broken into was having a dog. In the group of 440 some odd homes, only one home that had a dog actually got broken into. This neighborhood was in real problems because some of the break-ins were home invasions. And those are extraordinarily dangerous, very frightening.
Yeah, because they don't care about dogs or you.
Yeah, they don't care if they don't care about dog. If they don't care, if they're stupid enough to come in when somebody's at home, then they don't care about you at all. They think they can take control. And home invasions are extremely dangerous for the homeowner and the occupants of the house. So it turns out that if you have a dog, you're much, much safer. And the interesting thing I found when I was out campaigning for state rep was that there's an awful lot of people in New Hampshire who have dogs. And I actually think that actually keeps the crime rate down here.
I'm sure it reduces a lot of property crime. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think it does.
I think in a rural state there's a tendency to that anyway. The rural people are more likely to have dogs.
I was going to say, because my house is closer to the street, but my neighbor's house is set back, and so they're a bigger target to begin with, but they don't have dogs because one of the women who lives there is allergic. But they got broken into, and my wife's like, well, people might break into our house. And I'm like, no, they're not, because we have two very large dogs, and they sound like large dogs when they bark. So when people come up to the door or they're making noise outside and the dogs start barking, they're going to go, let's go check out the neighbor's house. This is Grok Talk. Doctor?
No, Emily.
Emily. Just Emily, no doctor. All right, Emily Sandblade, thank you so much for coming in. We'll be back with David Bozell. Stay tuned.